Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. And in the studio with me this evening is Chris McCusker from the SNP's Socialist Group. Good evening, Chris. Welcome back to the show.
Good evening, Gordon. Thank you very much.
Now, we've got a crowded show again, as usual, tonight, Chris. And first story tonight is the Scottish budget date has been set. The Scottish Government's budget will be published on the 6th of February 2020, the Finance Secretary Derek Mackay has announced today. It comes after the UK government confirmed that their budget would be delayed until the 11th of March 2020. Mr Mackay said the UK government's approach to the Scottish budget has been completely unacceptable and has shown disregard for devolution and a lack of fiscal responsibility. The timing of the UK budget made it impossible for us to publish our own budget after the UK government's without drastically restricting the time for parliamentary scrutiny. In these exceptional circumstances created by the UK government, it is important, it's vital, beg your pardon, I've got a stuck script here, there we go. Okay, apologies. The script sometimes sticks. Okay, I beg your pardon. Okay, in these exceptional circumstances created by the UK government, it is vital that we give the local authorities and public services clarity on their budgets. That's why we have made the decision to publish our budget in February, which will allow local authorities to set their budgets and council tax before the legal deadline of the 11th of March. I look forward to publishing the budget that will help to tackle the global climate emergency, reduce child poverty and boost the economy. We'll work closely with the Scottish Parliament to agree a timetable for the budget bill to allow maximum scrutiny whilst ensuring certainty for Scotland's vital public services. So Chris, the Scottish Government decides not to wait for the British Government and their budget.
Yeah, and showing a bit of leadership, you know, showing the UK Government that Scotland doesn't need to wait for them, they can just go ahead and, you know, as I was saying to you before we came on air, Derek Mackay will be damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. If he sets a budget too low, the Tories will jump all over him. If he sets a budget too high, the Tories will jump all over him. So he might as well just, you know, go for it, because he's going to get pillared anyway. Interesting that when I was driving in tonight, I heard that Cosla have already put in their bid for the 1 billion for extra money for the councils. So they're trying to get that money ring-fenced as soon as possible to try and mitigate the previous cuts that the Scottish Government have had to make in the face of austerity. So interesting to see. I don't think they'll get $1 billion, but you know, they might get, you know, nearly half that, or maybe even 3/4. But we'll need to wait and see.
Well, also, I mean, there are other responses to this today, particularly from the Scottish Green Party, and the Greens co-leader Patrick Harvie has also said that this avoidable crisis has been created by the irresponsible British government, and it's throwing Scottish public services into uncertainty. Now, there is no risk-free way for the Scottish Government to deal with this situation, but waiting until mid-March until they publish a budget would be the most damaging option. So we welcome the announcement that it will be published before the UK budget. So is this Patrick Harvie also, you know, coming out virtually with the same comment that you've just done, that somehow or other Scotland has to move forwards and we can't wait?
I'm glad that Patrick's kind of like on the same train of thought as myself. We almost inevitably find common consensus with the Greens, and I would have expected Patrick to welcome the fact that the Scottish Government have been adult enough to say, look, we're not waiting any longer. Because the other point that we have to make is that the 11th of March is the last legal day that the councils have to set their budgets. So
they can't go over that, or they would be penalties to,
yes.
I would guess, to pay for them.
So you know, this is again the Scottish Government adhering to the letter of the law to allow the local councils to fix their budgets for the year ahead.
Well, Patrick has gone on to say here that he says the backdrop of Tory chaos must not let us lose focus on what's actually needed from Derek Mackay. Scotland needs a climate emergency budget which changes direction on polluting transport policies, invests in low-carbon solutions and creates new jobs in green industries, whilst protecting local services around the country. The Greens have been successful in recent years in achieving change in the budget process. And even in light of the timetable ahead, we'll keep working to promote positive, creative solutions to the challenges Scotland is facing. To me, this also seems as if the Conservative government, as well as keeping Scotland guessing about their response to Nicola Sturgeon's formal request for a Section 30 order, keeping us waiting also for this budget. I mean, I don't really understand what they expect to achieve from this. Have you a theory?
It's tactics from Boris Johnson. You know, it's deflection tactics. It's you know, if I don't pay any attention to it, it'll go away. And
do you think they just don't care? It doesn't matter to them?
No, not really. You know, I mean, I heard today that Boris no longer wants to discuss Brexit.
Yep.
He now just wants to get on with discussing the business of the day.
Everything else is pushed to the side.
Everything else is just pushed to one side. The business of the day that Boris wants to discuss are possibly things like HS2 and Hinkley Point and Crossrail and all the rest of it. But he doesn't want to deal with the most complex of discussions, such as you know, the way forward for the Constitution, what his actual vision is of Brexit. It seems to be that the 31st of January, Brexit's done, and that's it. We can just
game over. Everybody can relax.
Yeah, but that's when Brexit begins.
Well. Also on top of this, the second story this evening is that the UK government is actually threatening parts of the Smith Commission commitment. Now, the Smith Commission, for people who don't remember, like you and me, Chris, was what happened in the wake of the referendum in 2014, where various promises had been made to Scotland. And the vow, yes, and the Smith Commission was set up to find ways of supposedly actioning the things in that vow. Now, the UK government are threatening to rip up a key commitment in the Smith Commission by threatening to block an independence referendum, the SNP has said. The SNP MSP and representative on the Smith Commission, Linda Fabiani, has now written to Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack, demanding that the UK government reaffirms their commitment to the agreement. The cross-party agreement followed a 2014 vow to deliver more powers to the Scottish Parliament. In agreeing in the Commission's proposals, every party signed up to the principle that the people of Scotland could choose independence. This was despite what was agreed in this Smith Commission. Nothing in it was supposedly preclude us having independence in the future. So the SNP is saying that they believe that the Tory party has torn this up now and are basically...
I think that they need to tear it up in order to keep the devolved competencies that are supposedly coming back from the EU to Westminster. If there is no Smith Commission effectively in place, it means that they can hold on to those powers.
So basically what you're saying is you think this is a prelude to the power grab?
Oh yeah.
And this is a way of them excusing the power grab. You say, well, no, that never happened.
Well, yeah. You know, because they could also then turn around and, you know, which is, it brings the argument to a more nuanced point, where if they say, well, you know, the Smith Commission is not in play here, you know, then, well, we can say, right, well, so is your once in a lifetime
Yeah.
in inverted commas, that's not in play as well.
Am I correct, Chris, in thinking that it was the Smith Commission which stated that, how was it they said it? It was something about they would not normally interfere in Scottish affairs or something like that.
Yeah. There was something.
Is that
about
the Sewell?
That.
That was the Sewell Convention.
That was
I
the
beg your
Sewell
pardon.
Convention. But there was something about this not normally, and it was.
It's the word normally.
It was changed from normally to something else in the English diction, which
They just inserted the word normally, I think.
roughly meant, this normally wouldn't happen, but in exceptional circumstances,
Yeah.
and it's always precluded with a but.
Yeah. Well, the commission has to be said that this is the Sewell, the Smith Commission had agreed that nothing in this report prevents Scotland becoming an independent country in the future should the people of Scotland so choose.
Yeah.
The question is now that the Conservative government appears to be saying that the people of Scotland have not so chosen. They haven't chosen to have a referendum. We're actually fighting not for independence, but for the right to vote for independence now.
Yeah. Well, no, actually, the way the SNP have framed it, it is the right for the citizens of Scotland to be asked the question.
Yeah.
So it's not the SNP saying we want independence.
It's the right
the
to...
SNP saying that the Scottish citizens have the right to be asked if they want to be independent.
And of course that goes back to the claim of right, the piece of legislation passed in Westminster, which guarantees us this right.
Yeah.
The Declaration of Arbroath, and so we have the documentation which guarantees us this right, and it's being denied. In December's general election, the Tories argued that the Union was on the ballot, and they went on to lose more than half their MPs. In writing to Mr. Jack Linda Fabiani, said a key principle agreed by all 5 parties on the Smith Commission is that people in Scotland have the democratic right to choose independence. This commitment is in black and white in the document agreed by your party and your government. Comments by yourself and by other representatives of the UK government suggest that you have now abandoned that key tenet of the Smith Commission. This would be a gross betrayal of the promises made to the Scottish people both during and after the 2014 referendum. So basically, I think Linda is saying that if the Conservatives continue with this, basically they might as well not have bothered having the Smith Commission.
Well, the Smith Commission was
and the election promises they made were rubbish.
Yeah, the vow was, as everybody knows, a complete and utter waste of time. The Smith Commission thereafter, to be honest with you, why the party actually signed up to that is absolutely beyond belief to my mind. It was riddled with a hole full of non-achievable
aspirations, but nothing
aspirations concrete. And various issues that were never going to be delivered to Scotland. So it was Disney proportions.
Yeah. Chris, can I ask you something?
Like a Cinderella wish list.
Can I ask you something? Do you think that the Conservatives, in doing what they're doing, do you think this is anti-democratic? Denying people of Scotland to vote, is it anti-democratic?
Of course it's anti-democratic, and not only that, it's a draconian Dickensian approach to basically say that we are superior to you, you're second class, therefore you will do what you're told.
And it doesn't matter what you vote.
Exactly.
And in fact, is it not true that Alistair Jack has already said that it doesn't matter how many elections the SNP win?
Well, yeah.
That it does not give a mandate for independence. It doesn't matter what we vote for.
It will not be in the space of time of Nicola Sturgeon's tenure. So
it's now decided it's Nicola Sturgeon's lifetime that it has to be. We have to wait.
If Nicola, and I hope she does, reaches the grand old age of 110, we will still be under English servitude. According to Alistair Jack, which is absolutely farcical to believe that half a dozen MPs can hold Scotland to ransom and say, well, we lost our mandate.
But we get to tell you what to do.
But we still get to tell you what to do.
There is also this issue of, according to Mr. Jack, that any votes in the Scottish Parliament are entirely worthless when it comes to any kind of anything, basically.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the people of Scotland vote in their own in their elections.
Yeah.
Anything at all. It doesn't matter what we vote. We can't get anything that we want.
I could fully expect Alistair Jack to be quite happy to disband Holyrood, take out the seats, put in some pews, and start holding the Edinburgh Fringe there. Such as his total lack of
Don't give him ideas, Chris.
No, I know, but it's just that it was also saying something about. I only caught a snippet of the interview that he done on Sunday Politics. I don't have BBC folks, so.
Is this the one with Gordon Brewer?
This is the one with Gordon Brewer, and he was basically saying, that he would, quite happily move more departments up to Scotland.
Yeah.
And those departments would be top heavy of English civil servants.
Do you believe, Chris, that they will shut Holyrood down at the first opportunity they get?
I think that they will try to do so. Again, this is only my own personal thoughts on this. But yes, I think that they will pull out the stops in order. They have to be able. They will actively look to do anything to pull the rug under the SNP's feet.
I wondered whether this meant that they might be thinking about just direct funding all the councils, bypassing Holyrood completely, which makes it much harder for Holyrood to argue, because they've not dissolved Holyrood, they've not taken it over, they've just gone over the top. But then the question would be, would the councils be prepared to put up with that?
Well, yeah, and you would have to look into.
And the Scotland Act would have to be rewritten in order to do it.
It would have to be rewritten, but also you would have to look at the amount of councils that are SNP led or SNP Labour led, or I don't think there are any councils in Tory control in Scotland.
Not anymore. I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. But the other point that I wanted to make is that. The departments that are so underfunded in Scotland at this moment in time, the likes of DFID and East Kilbride.
This is Department for Overseas Aid, is it?
Yeah. I mean, it's woefully underfunded at this moment in time. And you couple that again with the HMRC, which one of its offices in Hannah Bardell's constituency got shut down.
So they seem to be closing down bits and pieces of infrastructure that they don't like.
Yeah. They seem to be trimming it down, and at the same time they're beefing up this Scottish office.
But of course, these are pieces of UK government infrastructure that they are closing off and centralising power in this new hub.
Centralising power into this new hub. Yeah.
Well, talking about Labour a few moments ago actually leads us quite neatly to our next story, which is, of course, the Labour leadership competition. Now, 5 have made it through to the next round of the Labour leadership contest.
It's difficult to say that.
It is, with your mother's teeth in. Yeah. Anyway, 5 candidates have made it through to the next round of the Labour leadership contest. Keir Starmer, Rebecca Long-Bailey, Lisa Nandy, Jess Phillips and Emily Thornberry. The leadership hopefuls passed the first hurdle after gaining nominations of 22 MPs and MEP colleagues, with one candidate, Clive Lewis, dropping out of the process. Obviously, he didn't get enough.
He only got 5 votes.
That's a shame, isn't it?
Poor Clive.
Anyway, all 5 All 5 candidates for the deputy leadership, Angela Rayner, Don Butler, Ian Murray, a Scottish lone
Pillsbury
Scottish
boy.
Labour MP, Richard Burgon and Rosina Allen-Khan made it through to the next round of that competition. Mr Starmer, the shadow Brexit secretary, was the clear favourite for the leadership among MPs, with 89 nominations. Rebecca Long-Bailey, the favoured candidate of many Jeremy Corbyn allies, came second on 33. Lisa Nandy, who had been critical of the party's push for a second referendum on Brexit, has 31 supporters, while Jess Phillips, the backbencher and women's rights campaigner, has 23 backers. Emily Thornberry just made it over the line with minutes to spare after picking up some nominations from MPs who had previously backed Lewis. Like Phillips, she has 23 nominations. Now, Lewis, who is a pro-EU voice in the left wing of the party, managed to get only 5 supporters. Withdrawing his candidacy, he said, "At this stage, it's clear that I won't get on the ballot, so I'm standing aside in a spirit of pluralism, diversity and generosity that I have promoted throughout this campaign, so that those who have supported me can recast their nominations." The contenders will have to pass a second hurdle of gaining nominations from at least 33 constituency Labour parties or 3 affiliates, of which 2 must be trade unions representing at least 5% of the affiliate membership. If they manage to get through that round, they will then make a final shortlist from which party members, trade union members, members of affiliated societies and registered supporters will choose a winner. Goodness me, that's complicated. Starmer is all but certain to be on the ballot paper, as he has the backing of Unison, the UK's biggest union. Unite, the GMB, USDA and the CWU are yet to declare who they will back. Momentum, the left-wing grassroots campaign group, has decided to back Long-Bailey. In the deputy leadership contest, Rayner was far out in front with 88 nominations, while Murray had 34 and Butler got 29. Allen-Khan had 23, while Burgon had just made it over the line with 22. Ed Miliband was among prominent Labour figures to reveal on Monday that he was backing the front-runners Starmer and Rayner. Speaking on LBC, Phillips said that she would like Nandy to win if she was not successful herself, and backed Murray for deputy. The party will soon be holding a series of hustings across major cities in the UK, but some of the candidates spoke out against the decision not to hold events in some regions or smaller towns. "I am disappointed that the party has chosen not to organise leadership and deputy leadership hustings in every Labour Party region in the nation," said Starmer, and concerned that this decision does not reflect well on the party and will be a step backwards in the whole movement's determination to take the argument for radical Labour back to the country. Now, I'm going to move on to our next story in a moment, but Chris, just for the record, your response to the Labour runners and riders and the candidates today, any surprises in there for you?
No, there's no surprises apart from Ian Murray, deputy leader, and I think, to be, be careful what you wish for, because you might just get it, or be careful what you don't wish for.
Well, he's running second in that race at the moment.
Yeah, but I wouldn't rule him out. The interesting one for me is obviously Rebecca Long-Bailey, a clear Corbynite.
Why do you think that's interesting? You think it's just interesting that she's there at all?
No. It's interesting the fact that if you know anything about the internal makeup of the Labour Party, the internal PLP is predominantly on the should we say centre right or right of centre. They're more Blairite than anything else. Whereas and that's where you would see people like Lisa Nandy and Keir Starmer, and then on the sort of like Labour left of Corbynism, you've got Rebecca Long-Bailey, as I said. You've also got Emily Thornberry.
She only barely made it. People were thinking that Thornberry might not actually make it onto the list at all.
Well, she was very late, and you can see that she's been the benefactor of Clive Lewis.
Yep.
Thing like,
Of course, Lewis famously was the man who was saying that there should be another independence referendum, was he not?
Well, yeah.
He was notable in that respect.
Yeah, and I think you know what Scotland have to sort of like take an interest is that the centre right of the Labour Party will not contemplate independence.
Is it
vote.
not true, Chris, that Keir Starmer's credentials are rather more left of centre than right? I mean,
yes.
I shudder to say he's far left because he isn't, obviously.
He's not far left, no. But in saying
he's
that,
not a Blairite, though, is he? Really?
I think he's okay.
A soft Blairite.
I'll happily concede that he's a centrist then.
Okay.
But you know, I think the proof is in the pudding when you actually give him his full title of Sir Keir Starmer. Right now, that knighthood should really not sit squarely on a lefty's shoulders.
Well, I've been reliably informed that it's only because Keir Starmer was the Attorney General once before that he has that honorific of Sir, and it's not necessarily because of greasing
it's not
palms
a hereditary thing or anything like that. No, but he has had the blade tapped on the shoulders. And you know, he's quite happy for the continuation of the House of Lords, whereas earlier on Rebecca Long-Bailey was saying that she's quite open to having a discussion about abolishing the House of Lords. Now, you made the point earlier that would go down like a lead balloon in the parts of England and Wales because they love their lords and ladies and
Wales,
their peerages and whatnot, what have you. But that to me is more of a socialist Republican stance to take, so you know there is an awful lot there for Scottish voters to keep an eye on, because the shape that the Labour Party takes in England will go a long way to defining what the future is for Scottish Labour.
If there is a future for Scottish Labour.
Well, you know, an awful lot of people say that there isn't there is no future for Scottish Labour. There is a future for Scottish Labour at this moment in time. We're getting warm chat from Monica Lennon and Neil Findlay. Is that his name? Neil Findlay? The MSP in Edinburgh. And they're sort of like warming to the fact that, you know, the Labour Party need to start thinking about having a cross-party discussion on the Constitution going forward.
Perhaps allowing Scottish Labour to have its own policy on independence.
Yeah. But then you know that's been sort of like,
there's no talk of federalism this time, is there?
Yes, there is actually. I was just about to say that.
I was going to say I haven't heard it yet.
Richard Leonard is.
The F word has been mentioned.
He's holding out for some sort of federalistic deal, and you know we'll see how far down the road that takes him.
Well, Chris, I'd like to leave the subject of the Labour Party there for the moment and move on to something even more depressing, which is Britain's economy. And Britain's economy grew at its weakest annual pace for more than 7 years in November, raising expectations that the Bank of England will cut interest rates later this month. Monday's official figures showed that the economy in November, just before last month's decisive election win for the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, was just 0.6% larger than the year before, the weakest expansion since June 2012. This is incredible. I mean, we're talking about going back, now 7 years almost, longer. 9 years for economic figures as bad as this.
And then this goes a long way to explain as to why Boris Johnson was quite happy to have the election in December before these figures came out in January.
Which would have made his
job an awful lot harder to get that 88 majority.
The November figure represented a slowdown from an annual growth of 1% in October, after that month's growth pace was revised up from previously reported data. Output in November alone shrank by 0.3%, to the biggest drop since April. Economists polled Reuters had expected unchanged output for the month. The weak data reflected the uncertainty of last autumn about Brexit and the election, said John Hawksworth, the chief economist and accountant for PwC. It is too early to say for sure if the economic momentum will pick up in the new year. So, even the economists are worrying now that things are going to change at the end of this month.
Yeah, and they do say that hindsight is, a great thing. If you couple this report along with the recent reports that the NHS England is actually underperforming, showing the worst results within the last 10 years.
Yeah.
You also add that to the fact that the report on the Russian infiltration to the election process is still yet to be published, even after it had been cleared. And is soon to be buried because there is no longer Dominic Grieve. You put these three things together and you ever wonder why the Tories amassed a majority when they did, because these things are now coming home to roost.
Yeah.
And pretty much.
But the trick was obviously to conceal them long enough to win the election
now,
and then worry about it after.
Yep. And the fact now is the fact that England and Wales and Northern Ireland as well has just got to suck it up, because you're stuck with Bojo for the next 5 years, and you're not there is no, to me there doesn't look to be a bright future in sight for.
Well, speaking of sucking it up and lacking a bright future, brings us to our next story this evening, which is the rising number of benefits claimants who are being underpaid. Now, the SNP has slammed Tories over their mismanagement of welfare after official figures showed that the number of people claiming benefits who have been underpaid has almost doubled. New analysis shows that the proportion of claimants who've been underpaid due to official errors has risen by 86% to almost 1,000 since 2011-2012. The total number of claimants underpaid by the DWP has risen by 64% since then. Now, the SNP has cited these figures as further proof that Westminster is failing on welfare and has reiterated its demands for the transfer of all social security powers to the Scottish Parliament. The SNP's MSP Bob Doris has said the Tories have an appalling record of failure and mismanagement when it comes to social security. And this is yet further proof that the Tory welfare cuts and reforms are not working. No system will be free of human error, but the rising number of DWP mistakes point to a systematic problem rather than mistakes by individual staff. The rollout of universal credit has been a disaster, but the Tory ministers have pushed on despite being warned of the horrific impact on those caught at the sharp end. Now, the next story this evening, Chris, I'm waiting for a rather slow screen tonight here, okay? Sorry about this. The next story, Nicola Sturgeon, it's also linked to this. Nicola Sturgeon has today thanked volunteers for helping to tackle food bank misery. Yeah. And the First Minister has thanked compassionate community volunteers who are helping those facing hunger in Scotland. Ms Sturgeon was in Kinross to express her gratitude to Broke But Not Broken, a volunteer-led project, which runs a food bank and advice an advice hub offering people support before they end up in a crisis situation. The First Minister underlined that the food bank use has been directly linked to UK government welfare cuts, benefit sanctions and the introduction of universal credit. According to data from the Independent Food Aid Network, almost 600,000 food parcels were distributed in Scotland between April 2018 and September 2019, and that is a 22% increase compared to the last recorded period. So what is going on, Chris? Things seem to be getting worse still.
Things are still getting worse, and I have to point out that the march on Saturday that was attended by 80,000
Plus, according
plus
to my
activists,
my sources.
Scottish citizens who marched through some of the most horrendous weather that we could possibly imagine, but still managed to have a wee mini ceilidh underneath
I saw the clip of that
bridge, which was quite nice. But they actually, all under one banner, had asked for donations for the local food banks before the march kicked off at Kelvin Grove Park. And I've seen a picture of a van.
And they do this at every march, do they not?
They do this at every march, and there was a picture rammed full of food parcels.
Yeah.
Just people bringing along their poly bags with,
packed with food.
Packed with food. So you know that's a tremendous sight to see, and it really gives you heart of the inclusiveness of
the generosity of Scottish people,
generosity of the Scottish citizens. So but these figures are absolutely, they are constantly rising, and what is inexplicable to me, Gordon, is the fact that Scottish Labour will not stand with the SNP out of sheer grievance to actually ask for these powers to be devolved to Scotland so that we can tackle it directly ourselves. You have to imagine the fact that Scotland is basically fighting austerity on all fronts with one hand tied behind their back. Yeah. That hand could be released if the Labour would just stand up and grow a backbone and say, look, do the maths.
I've been reminded actually that the Labour Party abstained on the benefits cap when they could have gone against it and said no to it. They could have gone against it.
Of course they could have. Again, not for the first time. It was last week that Labour abstained on the whole proposals that the SNP put through. I think Joanna Cherry, she tabled over 30 odd amendments.
I think perhaps people would have more time for the Labour Party in Scotland if they dropped the tribalism and started working for the people again, as they are supposed to do.
As they are supposed to do, and this is something that again, it smacks of sheer ineptitude on the behalf of Richard Leonard and the Scottish Labour Party, because Nicola just makes a complete arse of him every Thursday. And he stands up and he wants to do this, and he wants to put things back into public ownership, and yet Nicola just turns around and says to him, right, well, why don't you just join with us and ask for these powers to be devolved then?
But they won't do it.
No, they won't do it.
Chris, I'm going to move us on now to something else the SNP is involved in, and that is they've challenged the Conservative government to confirm future investment in Scotland's Islands Growth Deal and to commit to 50-50 funding as previously promised. The UK government was criticised last year after shortchanging the Tay Cities deal to the tune of £50 million. The SNP representative for Naílan Anlar, I can never pronounce that, apologies.
Anar.
I'll get a pronunciation on that later. Okay, but
doesn't it help when you've got the dog's teeth in?
I've got the dog's teeth on tonight. Yes. Where were we? Oh yes. So anyway,
Angus
McNeill MP. They've demanded that the Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack comes clean and confirms whether or not the Tories will match funding from the Scottish Government. While Westminster appears to have stalled on the issue since last July, Common I can never pronounce all these names. Somebody will have to school me on the Gaelic. Orkney and Shetland councils have been working together to develop a framework on how funding would be spent. In commenting, Alistair Allen MSP said, since the Islands Growth Deal was officially announced last summer, the Tory government have been giving us the silent treatment. No commitment, no timescale and no cash offer. The UK government previously said that they would match funding for Scotland's regions on a 50-50 basis, but we don't want to end up in the same boat as Tayside, which was diddled out of £50 million from Westminster. It's time for a bit of honesty from the Tories. Have they simply given up on Scotland and abandoned their promises to match investment? Angus McNeill MP added, the economic prosperity and jobs of islanders is on the line here. This growth deal could help create hundreds of jobs, so it is time that we were given the straight answer. Will the Tories put their money where their mouth is and match every single penny that comes from the Scottish Government? If not, it will send a clear message to people in the Western Isles, Orkney and Shetland that the UK Tory government simply doesn't care about them. I wish I could say this was the first time we had talked about the Conservative government not caring about people, but unfortunately this is a pattern.
Theme. Yes, it's a recurrent theme. But also, as well as that, the Tory government was supposed to be doing a 50-50 deal on the investment for broadband.
Indeed, yes.
And you know, they've come up shy with the money on that score. And you hear the Tories constantly carping on. One more notably this week, Jamie Green was carping on about the lack of vision by the Scottish government to, you know, move on with rolling out broadband and stuff like that. To which he got pelters on social media for that. But again, you know, the whole thing about the Highlands and Islands. One thing that strikes me, which is not in this report, although it goes a long way to pointing out the fact that the UK government really doesn't give two shinies about the Highlands and Islands, and it wonders me why is they constantly return a Liberal Democrat to Westminster. Is that I noticed that the courier companies from the centralised UK mainland will not deliver to the Highlands and Islands under normal rules.
No, they ask for a surcharge.
Anything else over a certain... And why would Highlanders put up with that?
That's a good question. That's something that's puzzled me for years.
Why would they put up with being horsed more money for something
do you remember when we used to have the postal service years ago before it was privatised? You could post,
the good old GPO.
You could post a letter or a parcel anywhere in the United Kingdom.
Correct.
Pretty much the same price everywhere.
Yes,
anyway,
aye.
we have to move on, Chris. The next subject this evening is actually the subject of motorists being breathalyzed or tested for drugs during the festive season. Almost 600 motorists breathalyzed by police over the festive season were under the influence of alcohol or drugs during the festive drink and drug drive campaign, which ran between December the 1st, 2019 and January the 2nd, 2020. Officers stopped 8,687 drivers, and 580 of these were detected for drinking or drug offences. The head of road policing, Chief Superintendent Louise Blakelock, said that over the course of our festive road safety campaign, 1 in 15 drivers were detected for drink or drug offences, which is extremely disappointing. The dangers of driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs are well known, and yet some drivers are still willing to take the risk. This is the first year we have been able to test drivers at the roadside for drugs. And almost 500 roadside tests were carried out, with 185 drivers providing positive results. Incredibly, 16 who tested positive are required to drive as part of their employment and may lose their jobs. No. This is astonishing.
How people can put their jobs at risk, as you know, and their families as well. Because obviously, if they lose their job, then it affects the family. So it's selfish actions, it really is.
Well, Chief Superintendent Blakelock continued. Once again this year, a number of drivers were reported to us by colleagues, friends or family. And I wish to thank everyone who's had the courage to report drink or drug drivers, and I ask you to consider, continue to report any concerning driving behaviour to us. Now, now the Justice Secretary, Hamza Yusuf, has said it's staggering that some people are still reckless and selfish enough to take drugs or alcohol before getting behind the wheel of a car. putting themselves as well as other road users at risk. While responsibility for obeying the law rests solely with the individual motorists, I commend those who took active steps to convince friends, relatives or colleagues not to drive with drink or drugs in their system, or who perhaps in challenging circumstances reported individuals they suspected of drink or drug driving to the police. So there is always this problem of what to do if you know somebody has taken something before they get in the car, whether they're drunk or whether they have taken marijuana or something. But this is the first year that the Scottish Police have been able to test for drugs.
Yes,
and I don't think from the sound of these figures that people who've been using drugs and driving really realised that.
No, possibly not. And it shows again that the Scottish Police are willing to be more proactive in trying to keep our roads safer. And the technology is now out there, and people that do indulge in recreational drugs need to be aware that the effect of taking drugs has the same effect as
but also
taking
they
alcohol.
have to be aware that they can be caught now. They can be tested for that too. So they're not going to get away with it as they once would have done.
Well, that's 100% correct, yeah. But the effects of alcohol and drugs in the bloodstream last long overnight and into the next morning.
No, you can still be over the limit the following day.
Many of these drivers have been caught the very next morning.
Well, one other aspect of this which is interesting is compared to last year's results, the drink driving offences are actually slightly lower. When we take the drug figures out of this year's, we actually have ended up with a slightly better result this year on drink driving. So
on drink driving, and there's many policy that have been put in place in order to encourage people not to drink and drive. You know, again, I attended the march on Saturday, and I drove to my local train station at Patterton and left the car there, not knowing how I had a rough idea how the day was going to go. Yeah.
So you decided to preempt it.
And I got a taxi back with a friend of mine that lives in Giffnock. Two of us shared the fare. And then the next morning, I took myself a brisk walk down to Patterton from the house and picked up the car.
Fair enough.
You know, and it's the most sensible thing to do. You know, I mean, why?
It's not rocket science, is it?
Oh, no, it's not.
Well, listen, Chris, I need to move us on tonight. Now, a story which you and I spoke about earlier on this evening is in the news today. That is Catalan MEPs are to take their seats, or have taken their seats in the EU Parliament. Catalan pro-independence leaders Carles Puigdemont and Antoni Comín took their seats in the European Parliament on Monday, vowing to force the Catalan independence cause onto Europe's agenda, just days after Spain repeated its call for their arrest. The two politicians, both of whom live in self-imposed exile in Belgium, have long been sought by Madrid over their role in defying Spanish courts to hold the 2017 referendum on independence and the short-lived declaration of independence which followed. This is a historic day for us, Puigdemont told reporters outside the European Parliament in the French city of Strasbourg, flanked by cheering supporters as he prepared to head into his first parliamentary session. We're here to remind people that the Catalan crisis is not an internal matter, it is a European one. Puigdemont and Comín were elected as European parliamentarians, or MEPs, last May, but were unable to return to Spain to take oaths and to collect credentials for fear of being arrested. However, their status shifted last month when the Court of Justice of the European Union ruled that another pro-independence leader, Oriol Junqueras, also elected an MEP in May, was entitled to immunity. Junqueras, who remained in Spain, was sentenced to 13 years in prison in October over his role in Catalonia's 2017 breakaway bid. After Spain's Supreme Court last week refused to recognise his immunity as an MEP and refused to release him from jail, the European Parliament on Friday revoked his mandate as he was unable to sign in as an MEP. Puigdemont called for Junqueras to be allowed to carry out the mandate that he had been handed by voters. If the European Union was really a union of rights and freedoms, Oriol Junqueras would be here today, he said. Spain's Supreme Court called on Friday for the European Parliament to strip Puigdemont and Comín of their immunity, reiterating that the pair should be handed over to Spanish authorities based on their European arrest warrants. So now we have both Spain and the European Union butting heads over whether Catalonian politicians can take their places. Remarkable stuff.
You know, I mean, as it was quite clearly pointing out there, that it is a matter that the EU have been laudably quiet on raising their eyebrows on for fear of retribution from the Spanish government, and you know, so they haven't wanted to rock the boat. But again, it comes back to this question of democracy, and if somebody has been elected to democratically serve as a representative of that, you know, a specific region or country, then you know, they have got every right to do so in my book.
It seems that way. I mean, if you've been elected by your own people and they have voted you in democratically to the European Parliament, then you should sit, whether or not there is some question over your previous behaviour that's not been dealt with. The European Union obviously felt that that was not important enough to preclude these men from taking their seats.
Well, yeah, and that's why I say is the fact that the European Union have been, you know, suspiciously quiet on the whole question of Catalonia.
Chris, can I just ask you something? Do you think that this is a sign of a change in the attitude of the European Union to Catalonian self-determination, or their demand for self-determination?
I think it's a softening of the position. I don't think that the EU would dare to interfere in one country's internal wrangling.
But in this case, these people have been elected to the European Union, so it must put it inside their jurisdiction.
Well, yeah, that's correct. But then, you know, if you look back to last year, then would it not be the case that Alan Smith could have bent some ears, you know, with regards to Scotland's position, because the European Union have been fairly quiet in Scotland's position, although you have had a few high-level spokespeople come out and say, you know, Scotland would be welcome with open arms, you know, and we want you here, and yada, yada.
But that's all they can say at the moment, unofficially.
That's all they can say at this moment in time,
Well, Chris, I'm going to leave the Catalan story just for the moment. I'd like to move us back to something a little bit closer to home, in fact, very, very close to home, and that is the storm which has been raging outside all day today. Gusts of 80 miles per hour could hit parts of the UK as Storm Brendan sweeps in, prompting the Met Office to issue a weather warning. The Republic of Ireland will be, I was going to say it has been most affected by the storm, with Met Éireann putting out an orange wind warning for the entire country. So Ireland obviously has been taking a real battering today. Its British counterpart has also issued a weather warning covering the next 2 days, warning of strong winds across much of the western half of the UK. So it's a yellow warning covering the whole of Scotland tomorrow for strong winds.
As I was driving
and significant snowfall apparently as well.
Oh, lovely, we're going to be in for some snow, wonderful. Need to get my snow chains onto my tyres.
Well, apparently the areas of the north of Scotland are covered by a yellow snow warning for tomorrow.
But I noticed that the Storm Brendan is causing severe postponement and delays to the Kilmac ferries.
And the trains as well in Ayrshire as usual.
As well down in Ayrshire. And the several bridges are being closed to high-sided vehicles. There was a tree blocking the A77 down at Maple and Girvan.
Doesn't surprise me. It's a very exposed part of the country down there. According to the UK's Met Office, Storm Brendan is expected to plague Ireland until 9 p.m. this evening, bringing with it a significant risk of coastal flooding, whilst the warning of a very windy period is in force across the west of England, Scotland and Wales, and that warning is in force from 10 a.m. today. The east coast will not escape the impact of the storm, although it seems that there's a line of high wind warnings going straight up the Irish Sea and the west coast of the main part of the UK. The Met Office forecaster Simon Partridge said, as it pushes through, pretty much every part of the UK will feel the influence. Everywhere in the UK will have rain on Monday. Well, I think we've seen plenty of that today. At some point, he said, adding that the storm will move through pretty quickly. The Met Office warning added that disruption to travel was likely. Forecasters said that coastal routes, seafronts and coastal communities could be affected by spray or large waves. Now, this is something which happens every year at Saltcoats and Ardrossan, because the seawall is right in front of the railway track.
Correct,
and there are always wonderful pictures of waves breaking over the trains as they go into Saltcoats station.
But, you know, and as it can be argued, the fact that, you know, this constantly happens every year, then, you know, they should maybe showed up the seafront at Largs and Ardrossan. But I mean, I can hark back to a time in 1987 where they had the Great Storm in October. I was down in London for that event, and we were talking about cars being upturned and trees all over the place, and it was actually at that time declared a national disaster, and that was absolutely horrendous.
Well, thankfully it's not been as bad as that.
No.
We have a very brief amount of time to cover the last item tonight, which is, of course, the nominations for the Academy Awards for the Oscars. And I think most notable from the point of view of Scotland is the fact that 1917 is included in that, being as how not only was it partly written by Scottish writers, but was also filmed at Glasgow's Graving Docks last summer. I believe one of the bridge scenes was done.
Jumping or something like that.
They were crossing a bridge which had been blown up, and it was filmed across at Graving Docks.
It's fantastic to see, and again, I noted today that the next Batman movie is being filmed in Glasgow
as well. That's
so
interesting.
No Mean City is going to be turned into Gotham City overnight. But it shows that Scotland can attract big Hollywood blockbusters.
Does that mean that Commissioner Gordon's going to be phoning Batman up and saying there's been a murder?
There's been a murder, and we won't know until we find the body.
Well,
but you know, I mean, Glasgow itself is well known for, you know, having a plethora of jokers.
Well, it's also doubled in movies for American cities before now, has it not?
Yes, it has.
I think most notably, I seem to remember one. I think I'm trying to remember back. Was it Fast and Furious or one of these adventure movies?
Was one of them, but there was also the World War Z.
World War Z, yes.
The zombie apocalypse movie. But again, on a more serious note, you know, it means that Scotland is still attracting that business, that level of investment into Scottish locations, and puts us on, you know, a really good grounding for
Glasgow's 19th century architecture fits extremely well sometimes with period American cities, like Chicago and New York and places like that.
It certainly does. And if you look actually at some of the buildings around Garnet Hill and stuff like that, if you close your eyes, you could think that you're, you know, actually in San Francisco.
Yeah.
You know, with the big steep hill going up, you know.
Once you've tried driving a car up Scott Street, you would probably wish you were
have to have
San
that
Francisco.
touch control and stuff like that, you know, with the old clutch and stuff like that.
Well, listen, Chris, that's just about brought us to the end of the show tonight. So it only really is left for me to go through my usual routine at the end of each programme, which is to remind our viewers that making programmes in Broadcasting Scotland is an expensive business, and we rely on our viewers to help to help us manufacture these programmes. To do that, if you want to become a supporter of Broadcasting Scotland, you can find the details of how to do so on your screens now. If you go to broadcastingscotland.scot/donate, you can either make an individual donation or you can become a regular supporter paying £5 a month, which is, let's face it, a lot less than the BBC's licence fee.
It's only a pint of beer in the West End pub, I keep saying that.
Well, okay, Chris, thank you for that. Well, anyway, that is it from us this evening. So it only leaves me to say thank you very much, Chris, for,
thanks
for
again
helping me
for
dissect
inviting me
the news.
back in. I appreciate it.
And we look forward to seeing you again. I'll be hosting the show again on Thursday night, but Kenny will be anchoring the programme tomorrow. So from us at our broadcasting studios here at Cowcaddens, a very good night to you.